My name is Warrington Hudlin. I'm the president of BFF. I'm also a member of the board of trustees here at the Museum of Moving Image, and I welcome you all to this celebration of the 20th anniversary of the new wave of black cinema. And I want to begin by thanking our sponsor, NBC Universal, whose generous support made this event possible. Now, a word of awareness. We are recording this session today for internet and cable broadcast. So anybody here, if you continue to be here, is with your consent. Consent? Yes. All right. So if you're here with somebody's, significant other, now's the time to change your seats. Change your seats. It's coincidence. Uh-oh. So 1991 was an amazing year. As our keynote speaker was talking about. In fact, before that year, in the 70s, when black cinema first started, I was a young filmmaker trying to figure out how could I find someone to bang the drum, raise awareness. At that time, there's only one person writing for a publication who could possibly give us some shine. That person's name was Nelson George. And he worked way at the top of a long flight of steps. Anybody from old school remembers the Amsterdam News? It was like you had to climb a mountain to the top of the steps. And I got up there, I said, Nelson, excuse me, my name is Warrington Hudlin. I'm a filmmaker, and we really are coming out with these films. I'd like for you to write about it. And this brother, from way back in the day, immediately reported for duty. And since then, Nelson George has been the constant and enlightened voice for raising awareness of black cinema. Not only has he been awareness of black cinema as a writer, literally, he put his money where his mouth is. A young man came to him in 1985, I guess. He says, brother, he came to both of us, by the way. He came to me and said, man, I got this great idea for a movie. I'm sure a few dollars. Can you put some money in? I said, brother, hey, I'm not for profit. I have no money. I can't help you. But Nelson was doing better. So Nelson put a couple dollars into his movie. What the young man's name was? Spike Lee. So Nelson has been there for Spike Lee, for the Hudlin brothers, for the Hughes brothers. He's really been at the cutting edge of the emergence of black cinema. So it's very appropriate that he is our keynote speaker today. In addition to that, by the way, he's become since then a filmmaker as well, and he has a new novel called The Plot Against Hip Hop, which, by the way, is on sale. So before you leave, you got to get your copy. But Nelson George is a true Renaissance man, and if we need anybody to look back and tell us what it means and to start this discussion, it's Nelson George. Please welcome Nelson George.
Hello, everyone. How's it going? Well, 1991. Goddamn. 20 years ago. 1991. A year like many years. A year of wonder and miracles, tragedy and pain. It was the year, 20 years ago, confirmation hearings of Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court, and Anita Hill's sexual accusations, which became one of the big stories of that year. It was the year of Super Nintendo first arrived in the United States. And the Soviet Union dissolved, which was a big deal then and seems not as important now in retrospect. Bill Clinton announced he was running for president of the United States that year. In the summer of 1991, a basketball dynasty started when Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls beat Magic Johnson and the LA Lakers. A transition in sport which would take on much more meaning 5 months after that game, when on November 7th of this 1991, Magic Johnson announced that he was HIV positive, 20 years ago. One of the other things that we're here to celebrate 20 years ago was the emergence of black film, this new wave of black films. A huge number of films, 19 films were announced to be released that year. 19 films didn't come out that year, but they were announced. And depending on how you count, one of the things that we have to kind of talk about a bit is what is a black film. Of those 19 films, Ricochet was one of the films. But Ricochet was Ice-T, and Denzel Washington had a white producer, white director, white writers. So on my score, it's not a black film. Also, two other films that should be mentioned that I'm going to include in this list. One was Young Soul Rebels, which was directed by a black British director, which I feel like belongs in this discussion. And a film called Hanging with the Homeboys, which was directed by Joe Velasquez, who was a Latino Puerto Rican director, who the film was basically half Latin actors, half black actors, and I'm including it in here for purposes of our discussion. So let's go, I'm gonna go back. This is a book I wrote way back in the day, Blackface. It was very much a product of that moment in time. So I'm going back to that book. So I had everything in this book in order of release. So I'm just gonna name the movies and give a really quick description. New Jack City, Warner Brothers. I think everyone pretty much knows New Jack City. That came out, what do I have here? March 8th of 1991. The Five Heartbeats came right behind that. It was Robert Townsend directing, Keenen Ivory Wayans co-writer. A Rage in Harlem, directed by Bill Duke, which actually debuted at the Cannes Film Festival that year. Straight Outta Brooklyn, Matty Rich, which Matty's actually going to be speaking with us a bit later on Skype. Jungle Fever, Spike Lee film. Actually, Jungle Fever came out July, 2 weekends. Jungle Fever, I think I have on my notes, the 7th of July. A week later, Boyz in the Hood. So that was a hell of a combo right there. Boyz in the Hood went on to get Academy Award nominations and be the biggest grossing film of the black films that year, making $54 million, which is probably in today's money is over $100 million. Another film that's not remembered too well is Talking Dirty After Dark, which was directed by Tapa Carew, starred Martin Lawrence. It was set at a black comedy club, but it wasn't very funny. Up Against the Wall, which was one of the only films released by an African-American distributor. There's a funny story that goes with this film. It was directed by Ron O'Neal, the Superfly fame. Myself, Warrington Hudlin, Reggie Hudlin, and a couple other folks made a pact that we would see every movie released that year. And finding this movie was a bit of a struggle. And we actually was in LA, and we went the theater behind the theater at the Egyptian Theater, way in the back, and it was like, it was a pretty, the film wasn't a great film, but the viewing experience was even worse. But we did see it, it was released, and it was actually one of the few black distributed films that year. House Party 2, which was a sequel to the film that Reggie Warrington created, House Party, which was actually produced by George Jackson and Doug McHenry, who also produced New Jack City, and they were actually the leading black producers of that era. Strictly Business, a film that I co-wrote with Halle Berry, directed by Kevin Hooks. I'll tell you a little bit more about that if we have time. Young Soul Rebels. True Identity, a film many people forget, but it was directed by Charles Lane. And Charles Lane was a part of the independent film scene here in New York in the 70s. He made a film called Sidewalk Stories, which was one of the few black silent feature films. He played sort of a Charlie Chaplin-esque character. True Identity was a film distributed by Touchstone. It starred Lenny Henry, the British comedian, and it was a troubled production, let's put it that way. Living Large, directed by Michael Schultz, which is a kind of a Dorian Gray film about a TV correspondent. The farther he got away from his roots, the lighter he became. So a lot of those films were about class and identity issues in the black community. Strictly Business was, and that was a running theme, along with the hood movies, which everyone talked about. This theme about identity and crossover, where do you belong relating to the black community, was a big theme of a lot of all these films, almost all of them in some respect. And the last film that finally got released theatrically, though it had premiered at the Sundance Festival in January, was Daughters of the Dust, Julie Dash's auteur work set in the Gula Islands off South Carolina. A few things here to say right now. These films generated an incredible amount of media coverage. The New York Times did this famous feature story with pictures of Spike, Reggie Warrington, Charles Lane, Matty Rich, and Marivan Peebles on the cover. Wesley Snipes and Annabella Sciorra were on the cover of Newsweek for Jungle Fever. Everyone did trend stories. Time Magazine, Ebony Magazine. This black film thing was a huge media story that year. Within the industry, you could say that really She's Gotta Have It in '86 was the first shot across the bow. House Party, which did very, very well. A year later, school days. It seemed like we were building toward this year of all these black films, and it really came to fruition in '91. There actually would have been more films. Juice, actually, which was shot in '91, actually was released like January, February of the next year. This wave that we're talking about rolled on, I would say, for another about 5 years, maybe around '96, '97, it begins to trickle off to the trickle that we have now. The panel of many distinguished filmmakers we're going to have here are going to talk a little bit more about that. I want to make a couple more points about the year and just talk a little bit more context. While the major studios, Columbia, Warner Brothers, and Fox, distributed many of the most high-profile titles, the majority of the films came out on what we would call independent distributors, the kind of companies that actually don't really exist anymore in the film business. I'm talking about Miramax, which is now a shadow of itself, Samuel Goldwyn, which doesn't exist anymore, Keynote International, which doesn't exist anymore, African American Images, which was really put together, put out up against the wall. The film company that actually was most invested in black film was a company called New Line Cinema. And New Line was a genre. I mean, one reason they were involved in black film, they were a niche company. They did horror films, they did teen comedies, and for them, black film became part of that niche. So we're talking about House Party 2, Talking Dirty After Dark, and what am I missing? And Hanging with the Homeboys were all distributed by New Line. And in fact, the Hughes Brothers' Menace to Society would come out a couple of years later on New Line. In fact, that summer I remember meeting, I think I met the Hughes Brothers that year, and they were shopping around the script for that film. So it was a very interconnected community. One more company I should mention. It sort of frames again the fact that it was this landscape with a lot of rebels who were going to be open to black film. And that's Island Pictures. Island Pictures is a company that financed Strictly Business, which Halle Berry, Tommy Davidson, directed by Kevin Hooks, and they also financed Juice. Both of those films are actually shot at about the same time in New York City. And we actually had a basketball game against them at one point. We didn't do too well, the Strictly Business people. They had Tupac. What are you going to do? So before, I know time is short, I'm going to run and we're going to play clips from 4 of the movies. I decided not to do just clips. I wanted to give a real hunk to get a feel of the films. And the bits will be of New Jack City, 5 Heartbeats, Daughters of the Dust, and Jungle Fever. So we're going to see a bit of that, and then I'm going to come back and wrap up my comments and go to the interviews. So before we go to John Singleton, a few points I wanted to make based on what clips we've seen. The incredible impact of street culture, hip-hop music, obviously the crack era. Remember, '91 was still the height of the crack era, and filmmakers were grappling with that profoundly. The films that made the most money in that year were those that were driven by or dealt with urban culture, had hip-hop soundtracks usually, and often rappers from Ice-T to Ice Cube as part of the Matrix. The amount of acting talent that broke through or got showcased in these films is incredible. Halle Berry was actually in 3 movies that year. She was in Strictly Business, obviously this incredible performance as Viv, the crackhead. And when I was watching 5 Heartbeats, turned out she has a cameo in the 5 Heartbeats as one of the girls they sing to in the crowd at one point. Samuel L. Jackson, obviously amazing performance, also was in Strictly Business. Tommy Hicks, who you saw in Daughters of the Dust, well known for She's Gonna Have It. I'm just gonna mention a few other names. Chris Rock, Alan Payne, Morris Chestnut, Nia Long, Regina King, Cuba Gooding, Angela Bassett, who was in Boys in the Hood, Martin Lawrence, who was in several of the films, Anne-Marie Johnson, Leon, Michael Wright, the incredible Michael Wright, and even a lot of young white actors got breakthroughs during this period. Sam Rockwell, who's going on a fine career, had a little small part in Strictly Business as well. So these films created black stars, and that's one of the things that's missing now because we don't have the platform for these new generations of talent. One of the things that happened related to this was the fact that mainstreaming of the talent. Wesley was probably the most obvious example. Wesley is the biggest star of that year. I mean, it's remarkable. You see the 2 performances in the film, his charisma, his confidence. He plays a middle-class black person. He plays a crackhead. I mean, it's going to be a crack kingpin, but he held the screen. He was part of a movement of dark-skinned, chocolate brown sex symbols. You could throw in Michael Jordan and Big Daddy Kane, but Wesley was really the man. And, Denzel was still there, but that year, it was about Wesley. And Wesley made the choice, along with the direction of his agent at CAA, to be an action star. He was a martial artist, it was a natural transition, but that took him farther and farther away from these kind of roles. And eventually to Blade, which I like the Blade movies, but that was kind of the end of the run for him, and then he had his unfortunate tax problems. But his problems as an artist had started way before that. And in general, almost all of the talent we're talking about here, with the exception maybe of Sam Jackson, who I find has been very open to young filmmakers, has gone mainstream and has really gone back to work with emerging, not that they haven't worked with black filmmakers, but they haven't worked with emerging young talents. And that was a connection that was going on there with the Spikes, the Singletons, and so on. The young director-writers, this young talent, boom. But what happened over time is the talent got disconnected from the filmmakers. And that was a big, big problem. Niche market. One of the other things we always talk about, why did this black film thing end? One of the things that happened is that we were always perceived as niche market, right? So the distributors who distributed us were niche independents. Every now and then, the Universals and so on would do a Spike Lee movie or a Singleton movie. But this niche thing, as those niche distributors disappeared over the last 15, 20 years, so did these openings, because they were very open, because they were interested in making a movie for $8 million and made $40 million. No one's really interested in that business right now, not in a consistent way. So, and that's an industry issue or industry structural issue that affects the creation of these black films. How much time we have, Warrington? So what time is it now? Okay, real quick. Strictly Business, film I worked on. Good example of what was going on then. It was just a bunch of us together. It was Andre Harrell, who owned a rap label, Pam Gibson, who was part of a video production company. We said, let's make a movie. We had a party. There was a party in Brooklyn. We saw the hottest girl at the party. It was the corniest guy at the party trying to rap to the hottest girl at the party. That's a movie. So that's how Strictly Business happened. We saw the hottest girl at the party by the corniest guy at the party, and that became Strictly Business. The idea, how does the corny guy, the corporate guy, meet the hottest girl? And it really came out of a very simple idea.
Who was that hottest girl?
The hottest girl, I'm not going into all that. These are real people that people might know, actually, who were the hottest girl and the corny guy, but we're leaving that alone. That journey led us to Island Pictures, who were one of those niche companies interested in black product. And the issue that happened with the film that I think I can just address real quickly is this idea, what I call craft versus culture. We had a certain point of view. We were New York people, height of hip hop era, New Jack Swing. We met these producers who wanted to make this film, but they wanted to make basically a Hollywood version of that film. And even if you look at Halle's wardrobe in the film, that was not what the girl we were talking about would have worn. That was what they wanted her to wear. It was a really interesting thing about the film. Works and people find it very charming, though I find it very inauthentic because of a lot of things we had to do to get the film made. There was a lot of backstage drama involving the director who originally was assigned to it got fired, and Kevin Hooks, a very fine Hollywood director, black director, came in and did a great job. But I had this remarkable experience that I hope none of you have again, none of you share with me. That is to go the night your film opens, to have your limo with your friends, to go to a theater and see empty seats, and to have your dialogue bouncing off empty seats. It's a very humbling experience. Strictly Business tested incredibly well, but one thing that also comes out of this era that I'm very aware of, positive, quote unquote, positive black films test really well with test audiences. It doesn't mean people are gonna go see them. And that was one of the truisms that happened throughout this era as well. A lot of these films, Strictly Business being one, we had like a 93% approval rating at some screening. And oh my God, this is bigger than Batman. Ha. The truth was, there was a disconnect often between what we expected audience to go see and what they did go see. And a lot of what happened later on is that the urban film aesthetic, if you will, became to overwhelm a lot, and we got fewer and fewer of the middle class things. So, should we go over here? Okay, so that experience was quite profound. But let me give it this perspective. That was an exciting time to be young and black and be around that era, because quite honestly, I don't know how the hell we made this movie. There's a couple of movies that got made during that era by people who weren't very experienced. We stumbled our way through filmmaking because the doors were open and we learned as we went along. I look back on some of these films now. and go, wow, you can tell that these things were cobbled together by people just learning the craft. The problem was few exceptions. Most of the filmmakers did not get to make enough films to become really good filmmakers. But one of the guys who did, we're going to speak to. Hello?
So live with Spike, John Singleton.
John, can you hear me?
Yeah.
How you doing, man?
Good. You're in Queens?
You were in Long Island City, actually.
No,
Long
Astoria,
Island
brother,
City, okay.
Astoria.
Oh, Astoria, sorry. So, John, 1991, year
Yeah.
you made Boyz in the Hood. You actually made Boyz in the Hood 90.
90, fall of 90, yes.
A lot of what is the number one memory 20 years later? What comes to mind when I say Boyz in the Hood to you?
Just really my start, me figuring out how to actually make movies and how to be a filmmaker. I just caught the tail end of what you were saying about filmmakers at that time really just cobbling it together and trying to figure out how to do it. And for me, that's what it was. It was like me trying to realize my actual dream of wanting to be a filmmaker when everybody in the world was telling me I'd never do it.
Talk a little bit about the story of how did Boyz in the Hood get made? What was the journey from script to screen?
Well, I wrote it in the fall of 1989 when I was 21 years old. Actually, the genesis of the picture goes back further, even before I went to USC, when I was growing up here in LA, in South Central Los Angeles. And me and my friends would take the bus to Hollywood to go to the bigger movie theaters. And we would catch the bus home, and we'd always talk about the movie we went to see, and we would always talk about what movies we would want to go see. And inevitably, it was always like we would come back and just like, wow, really that was a good movie, but it really wasn't a good movie. And we didn't really know why we didn't think even some of the best movies were good movies, because we didn't see ourselves in them. It was we couldn't articulate it at the time. I don't think nobody could articulate, even myself. We couldn't say that, but it was like basically all of these stories, no matter what they were, we couldn't really identify with them because culturally there were no people like us on the screen. There were none of our experiences. And so we would basically make up our own stories and stuff about the movies we want to see or different things we want to do and stuff, right? And after a while, I was just like, I'm going to make movies. I think I'm going to become a filmmaker. And even my friends told me I probably would never do it. So it was kind of a kamikaze mission. But I ended up, long story short, cut to the chase. I go into high school and stuff, and I start figuring out really how to become a filmmaker. I should go to film school. It was between me, it was between business school, film school. And after a while, I just cut to the chase and said, you know what, I'm going to go for Buck and go to film school. I'm just going to go for it. And I had met Spike 2 weeks prior to starting USC.
At the Baldwin Hills Theater, I think?
No, this was in Santa Monica. This is She's Gotta Have It was only showing one place in town. I went down there. And actually, it's funny, those who don't know, I was supposed to see She's Gotta Have It before it came out, after he showed it at the San Francisco Film Festival, because he had friends that were friends with my mother. And my mother didn't let me use a car because she heard it was an adult movie. And I was I think I was ending the 11th grade or something, like under 12th grade, going to 12th grade stuff. And so when I approached him, I was like, listen, I heard you just got back from Cannes and everything, and doo-doo-doo, I dropped some names, a friend of his that went to Spelman that he knew. She said, I'm a filmmaker, and I think, she said, you and I should meet because, we got similar vibes. And we always point to this moment between the two of us because, people know how Spike can be sometimes. I said that going into the theater to him and how excited I was to see the picture. And he said, okay, see the picture and then I'll talk to you afterwards. And after the movie, this is one theater in Los Angeles. It had already shown in Brooklyn for about 2 weeks. It already showed in New York. It was a cessation in New York for about 2 weeks, and then they showed it here in LA. And inevitably in Hollywood, here's a young filmmaker, Spike, surrounded by all of these people, and you know, none of us looked like us. You know what I mean? Just like all these Hollywood types. And he saw me standing there, you know, and everything and stuff. And he moved everybody out of the way and he came up to me and said, "So, what'd you think of the movie, man? What you think of the movie?" He really wanted to hear. I said, "Man," I said, I was so proud to see like real black people, you know, just being us. You know what I mean? I couldn't totally articulate it in that way, but I was just like real, just to see us on screen.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
You know, one of the most remarkable things about Boyz in the Hood is the cast. I mean,
yeah. But here. So there's just, I have to say this because, you know, the mission of Boyz and Hood starts with that thing of knowing, of going to film school and especially USC film school, which is so, you know, basically Hollywood and straight commercial vision of me being a young black man going to film school. I think I was the first person to actually go to film school outside of that generation after Spike to just say, you know what, I'm gonna make a mission to make black film. And so for those next 3 years, I was trying to find myself and try to like, what could I do to identify myself to set me apart from other filmmakers? And Boyz and Hood was a thing. I said, okay, I'm going to make an LA movie. I'm going to make a movie that's like LA, you know, and that's why I wrote the script. I came out of the theater seeing Do the Right Thing. I was so excited about that. And I went to campus in late July and started writing the script. And a year later, we were working on the movie.
I remember reading it. I met you at some point just before you went into production, and I remember reading it and thinking, I'd never read anything like this before. It was like a native son for now. For then, there was no, just a young black male film that captured the spirit, camaraderie, and the dangers of being a young black male, and it was remarkable.
Yeah. I really threw everything but the kitchen sink into that script, and just it was like beef stew. You know, I always say one of my fondest memories as a kid was going to the VA hospital with my grandfather and getting beef stew, you know, the Dinty beef stew. And I thought that was so tasty. Well, that was that movie was, you know, it had everything in it. It was just a full meal. It just had a whole lot of different flavors of what I thought, you know, would make a good movie.
I wanted you to talk about that cast because it's, you know, almost everyone who had in the film was going on to have a long and successful career. What were you looking for? I mean, you found so much great young talent. Nia, Morris Chestnut, on and on.
I was just looking for interesting people, people that would hold my interests as a director and that fit the characters. Some of them were actors and some of them weren't professional actors. There were people just that, you know, it may have been their first picture. Most of those people, it was their first picture. Ice Cube had never acted in anything before, but I was like, the role was written for him. The two roles that were written for actors were Ice Cube and Fishburne, because they were the only two people that I actually knew that, you know, were professionals doing their own things in entertainment in general. And so I was like, okay, Cube is going to be Doughboy, and Fishburne, he's got to play this father. And Fish was like maybe 28, 29. Yeah. He was maybe 6 or 7 years older than Cuba Gooding Jr., who was 22. So amazing.
Now the film was incredibly successful. You got an Oscar nomination. I think you're the youngest director, I believe, to get an Oscar nomination.
Yes.
In the industry, how did you feel the industry treated you and received? Because you were in a special time, special place. Were you embraced, or did you feel that there was still some wariness?
I think I was very much embraced. I think I was lauded and put up on a pedestal to a certain degree, and a lot of it was analogous to you know, I always joke around with Spike is like, you know, they made me to spite you, because they, you know, he was just in everybody's ass, like telling everybody the truth, what needed to be said in terms about hiring practices in this business, about just anything in terms of black people within the general pop culture. You know, being a filmmaker gave him a kind of a soapbox to speak on different things that a lot of people would not speak on. And so it was good for me because I was a young kid. I was 22 years old, and I just made a movie and it was like, okay, well, this guy, this guy is a filmmaker and everything and stuff. And my father's always told me, don't tell everybody what you're thinking. You know what I mean? Like, and Spike always made a pact, like, no matter the stuff that we don't agree on, we talk amongst ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, he hasn't made that pact with any other black filmmaker at all, any other filmmaker at all. But we made a straight pact, I like everything that he said during that times, and even now and everything. We support. We like a 1-2 punch in terms of what is right and what is wrong in this business, in terms of the way that it treats black talent in general, not necessarily black filmmakers, but black talent in general. And it's I don't think it's that much far from what it was maybe 50 years ago in a sense. I mean, I know you're still talking about Boyz n the Hood, but there's a lot of things that are happening within the entertainment culture that pertain to us as a people that I think should be addressed within this forum.
I was curious, 20 years later now, where do you feel like black folks are in the Hollywood system? Where do you feel that is?
I think that black talent is still very much marginalized. I think that there's so much talent, and there's so many vehicles. There's not that many vehicles for them to actually express themselves. You look at it, our presence on television has dwindled, not just in the comedy sector, but in any sector. The films there are not that many films that are made by black filmmakers, and as my friend Reggie Hudlin says, we make them and they take them. I mean, there are no black filmmakers making films with new talent that are going to make the next Denzel Washingtons, the next Wesley Snipes, the next Halle Berrys, the next Angela Bassett's. That tier of acting talent that is going to go off and do mainstream pictures or whatever, but and with a measure of respect and talent. What ends up happening is whenever we make talent now, they always put them with a co-star, a non-black co-star, to elevate that non-black co-star, and then that person may be the hottest person in the moment, and then they. And it's a certain paradigm that really disgruntles me, because even though I don't think audiences really understand how that works. You know what I mean?
Your name has been attached to I've heard Baby Boy 2. I've heard Boyz n the Hood 2. I heard an NWA movie. Where are you at right now with any of those projects?
Well, I'm still talking to Cube about NWA. There's a great script, but I think my next movie is going to be with Tyrese and Taraji, and it's a movie. It's not Baby Boy 2. It's a kind of crazy dysfunctional love story, but I mean, anything I do is going to have a lot of heart and soul to it, and really say to what's going on in contemporary America right now. But that's what I'm doing, and it's definitely a hood movie. I'm doing it here in Los Angeles, in South Central Los Angeles. It's got a crazy kind of like thing.
Have you written it already?
Yeah, I did. It's an original script by me, and I'm really proud of it.
So you return it?
And I'm proud with it, huh?
So it's a return to the hood.
It's a return to the hood. I mean, I never really left. I mean, I'm the only person in my business that actually has an office in Leimert Park. I've had an office in Leimert Park for about 13 years now, maybe 14 years, and we've cast Hustle and Flow and parts of Four Brothers, all these pictures, all out of there. I've seen new talent. I'm right on the street, just like people do it in New York. You got cheap office space and you got as much space as possible, and you just see life.
You've been there since you made Boyz n the Hood.
No, not since Boyz n the Hood. The original office from Boyz n the Hood is across the street from where I am now.
Right.
We're catty corner with Esselwan. Like it's, you can look right across the street and see Esselwan books if you know those. And it's right next to, remember where Robin Harris used to perform the Regency West?
Comedy Act? Was it Comedy Act Theater?
It's right next to the Comedy Act Theater. So it's great because, I've had screenings there, and I took the projection system out, the 35mm projection system out, because now I got to go digital. But I've had everybody in the business down there to watch films, and we've been on like kind of like what's known as the Bel Air circuit, where a new movie comes out on the weekends, and I can get it from the studio, and I can project it and stuff, and you can hear it in Dolby right out there on the street. And you know, we have people up there just sitting up there, you know, watching the latest pictures. And
Well, John, we have to wrap with you. I just want everyone to acknowledge John Singleton, please.
say something. No, it's very, very important that despite the situation right now in terms of where the industry is, people have to understand the industry has always been what it's going to be, and that the most innovations that have ever come out of us as storytellers have been on people, you know, entrepreneurs taking in their own energy, whether or not it was Oscar Michaud or Melvin Van Peebles or even Spike making his first picture. It's always been that those people taking in their own hands, telling their stories and getting them out in their own way. So I don't want any budding filmmakers out there to feel disgruntled or disenfranchised that they can't do it, because, you know, we've always had these obstacles in our way to actually get our stories out, and we've always surmounted them, you know. So, you know, do what you got to do and don't let anybody stop you. That's what I was saying.
Thank you so much, John.
All right.
Hello, Matty?
We have to dial it in.
Okay. So we're waiting on Matty Rich, director of Straight Outta Brooklyn, will be up in a minute. I remember I met John Singleton before Boyz in the Hood was made. I was one of the first, I think I'm the first person to write about him. I used to write for the Village Voice, an article about South Central LA, and I'd read his script, and it was amazing. I'd never read it before, and I got to know him back then. And Larry Fishburne then, was a huge part of that process for John, and was kind of like a directing coach on the scene, behind the scenes, helping John out. They shot on the streets of South Central. They shot in some dangerous places. There was a lot of negotiations that went on to make that work. And Leimert Park, where John has his production office now, he actually had his company then, when he first started out, in that same complex, which is out, beautiful artistic section of LA, not far from the Crenshaw Mall. So, Matty?
Yeah, I'm with you.
How you doing?
Good, how you doing?
So we're here at the Museum of the Moving Image, and we're talking about 1991, and you had a profound impact on that year. Talk about the journey of Straight Outta Brooklyn.
Well, number one, peace and blessings to everybody in the house. You know, Straight Outta Brooklyn was literally like a dream come true for me from a kid growing up in Red Hook Projects in Brooklyn. And when I first made the movie, I didn't think the movie was going to go into the theaters. My goal was to make the movie for it to be in high schools around New York City. You know, a movie to use as a tool for young people for what not to do.
Huh. It's an educational piece, kind of.
Exactly. So the movie kind of just took a life of its own. As, you know, I started out literally with the help of my mom and my sister using their credit card.
Huh.
And with a whole idea of making a full-length 35 millimeter feature film with credit cards. And of course, I was like this. I was 17 and a half, 18 years old, and you couldn't tell me nothing, you know. You couldn't tell me I wasn't going to make this movie.
How did you talk about? I mean, how many days did you shoot it in? How did the process happen?
Okay, well, first of all, it took about, let's say, about 35 days to actually shoot the film. The process was basically this. I wrote a first draft first, and we literally shot in the Red Hook housing projects in Brooklyn. I used a lot of my relatives' apartments. My grandmom's house was the family's house. The actors were all on deferred payment, so I didn't have any money, so it was all like, if the movie once the movie makes it or wherever direction the movie was going to take on, that you know, hopefully everybody can, you know, get some rewards out of the movie. So it was literally a labor of love for everybody, from the crew to, you know, the actors and to myself.
How did you find the crew as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid? How did you find the crew to shoot the film?
In the newspaper. I don't know if Backstage paper still exists in New York, but I literally put an ad in Backstage paper for actors, for crew members. I held auditions in Harlem, and literally people just came out of the droves, from crew members to actors. And I was literally doing this on the fly because I didn't have a mentor at the time, or no one to tell me, okay, this is how this goes or whatever. So I had crew members showing up at my casting auditions. But I found this director of photography who had a 35 millimeter camera. He had equipment. And so I used him and basically crew members as gaffers and grips, and I had a lighting guy. And then that's how it just got started. And I would make the movie. It took about 35 days, but I would make it in stages, because the first part of the movie that I shot an 8-minute clip.
Uh-huh.
I literally ran out of money, and I used that clip as a way of, you know, getting other potential people to invest in the movie. So that's it. So once I screened the clip to some potential investors, they liked it, and then that became Straight Outta Brooklyn. It just took a life of its own after that.
In terms of, I mean, I was curious. What was Spike, or was there any kind of inspiration? What led you to believe that you needed to make this film? Was it just internal, or the external inspiration?
Well, it was more internal. This was a story that I wanted to tell. This is a story that I lived with. It was a little bit about my life. It was a little bit about people that I grew up in Brooklyn knowing. You know, those young men, friends of mine, who went off to the wrong path and made some really bad decisions. And so I really wanted to make this film to speak to those who never had the opportunity to make a decision yet of doing something right or doing something wrong. So I literally, that was my inspiration. It was an internal thing, a gut thing, that I felt that there was no one who could stop me to complete this movie.
For people in the audience who may not have seen could you give us what if you had to summarize, what's the plot of Straight Outta Brooklyn?
Straight Outta Brooklyn was the story of this young kid named Dennis, who was raised in the Red Hook housing projects in Brooklyn, and this kid heard his father, you know, who was unemployed, who was an alcoholic, you know, physically abused his mother, and because he was stuck in the mentality that they would never make it outside of the project. So this kid heard all of the frustrations of his dad, being frustrated about not being able to be the man of his house to provide for his family. So this young kid, who was a bright kid, decided with his friends that he's going to rob a drug dealer. So that was his way to get straight out of Brooklyn, is to use that money to get his family out of the project to a better life. And so in those choices that Dennis made, there were repercussions to his choices. And in the choices, what happened at the end of the movie was kind of a very tragic ending, but it was an ending that was powerful, that kind of provoked a lot of people's minds of getting straight out of any life, if it's community, if it's South Central or France or whatever it may be, there's always a better way than the typical way. So that's what the premise was for Straight Outta Brooklyn.
So you make the film, you get some investors. What's the leap from you making the film to it becoming a theatrical release? What happened? What was connected?
Well, once I finished the first cut, I went to this post-production place called Sound One. It's on Broadway. and I was editing my film there, and this guy knocks on my door, and his name happens to be Jonathan Demme, and he was he was directing Silence of the Lamb. He directed Silence of the Lamb, but he was doing the post-production of Silence of the Lamb at Sound One, and he wanted to know who I was. And I introduced myself to him, and I showed him my first cut of the film, and he really took a liking to it. And then John introduced me to Ira Deutschman, who was an independent producer at the time. He went to run Fine Line Features. And Ira came on as my exec producer, and they enrolled me into Sundance. And I didn't even know what Sundance was, to be honest with you. But they said it was in Utah. It's relatively, like I said, I made the movie. I thought that the movie was going to be something that was going to go into high schools across the city in New York as a prevention kind of a thing. But they thought that this was something that could play really well at the film festival. So I went to Sundance and I screened it there. And then while I was there, I started doing interviews. And next thing you know, while I'm there, I'm in the New York Times and the LA Times as this young kid who, I was literally, I just turned 19 at the time.
Wow.
And while I was in Sundance, I was doing all these articles and they were posted, and then I won the Special Grand Jury Award there. And so it's like, then I had distributors while I was there looking into buying my film. And I met with Samuel Goldwyn for the first time. I was amazed. And he liked my movie, and he said he wants to be the distributor of my film. And so I was like, sure, absolutely. I mean, I had some other different choices, but I liked what he was talking about and how he wanted to platform my film. And then I came back to New York, and the craze of the Matty Rich name just went to a whole nother stratosphere after Sundance.
So I want to, we have only a few more minutes. I want to talk, you've done a lot of TV, you've done feature films since Straight Outta Brooklyn. Looking now, where do you see the atmosphere, the landscape for black filmmakers now, black talent now in 2011?
Well, I think that now we're living in a medium where, you have all of these different, from Facebook to Twitter, you have access to your fans, you have access to people who can help you make films. I think that the climate of African-American films, we need to make our new releases like an event. Like when Straight Outta Brooklyn came out, Boyz n the Hood, New Jack City came out, these movies were like events. And what I mean by that is that people came out in droves because they were excited to see us on the screen. And now it's not like that anymore because there's so many different ways of distributing projects. If it's from mobile to, whatever have you, it's not as simple as going to the theaters and going straight to DVD now. So I think that we could, if we use the new technology that we all have embraced to promote and market our films and for us to get back into the theaters, because that's what, the bottom line is for Hollywood, is the amount of numbers that African-American movies does in that first and second week window. So if we really start supporting our African-American projects, whatever it may have you, I think that is going to go a long way in getting us back to that magic year of the 90s when we all came out, like Firestone.
Oh, we have a couple of minutes left. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on, whatever projects you have in the hopper right now?
Well, right now, I've been doing gaming stuff. I worked in Paris, France, for Ubisoft, producing games for them. Now I'm back in LA, have my own gaming production company. I have some action games, adventure games. All of my games, they all have a movie component to it. And so, literally, I have a lot of different interesting projects that I'm working on, and I'm sure in 2011 you guys are going to hear a lot more. 2012. Oh,
All right.
still
What
in
about?
2011.
Hey, Matty, I want audience to thank Matty Rich for talking with us.
Thank you so much. Okay. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matty.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
So that's the end of part one. Thanks, Nelson George. But part two is the best part. Why? Because it's about you guys. So take a 15-minute break. Look at your clock. 4:45, we're going to have a discussion of the senior faculty at NYU and major filmmakers, directors, programmers, journalists, bloggers, and it's about the future. If we just spent the last half hour talking, 30 minutes, 45 minutes talking about the past, the next time, in 15 minutes, let's start a new conversation about the future. See you in 15 minutes. Welcome back. As I said before, interactivity is really the password and code word of our future. And I think that this opportunity today, almost a historic opportunity to having first, with the guidance of Nelson George, looked back at 20 years ago and have a discussion now of where we might go. So hoping us to do that, I'm very, very fortunate with two people who are the custodians, the guardians of the next generation of filmmakers. We have the dean of the worldwide prestigious NYU Film School, Cheryl Antonio. And the chair of the dramatic writing program at NYU, Richard Wesley. But although I also, just a little trivia, there would not be a Biggie Smalls had not he created that name in one of his well-received screenplays. Inside joke, who gets it? Nelson George? Uptown Saturday Night. See, that was a quiz question. Nobody's hands didn't go up. See, and by the way, that's why we're here today. Too much of what we should know, we don't know. So I congratulate you all to come out to get some of this knowledge. We have generous, these people are very busy, and they donate their time to come share with us. So we're going to do it in two steps. First, we're going to start the conversation here, and then we're going to expand it out. And as the folks who on a daily basis see these young, fresh faces coming in, saying, I want to be a filmmaker, what can you honestly, in good conscience, tell them about their prospective future? Who wants it first?
Let's not say anything. So I think both Richard and I, who are colleagues at the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University, Richard is the Lord Mayor, Governor, and Prince of the dramatic writing program, and I as Associate Dean of Film and Television and New Media, and actually the Clive Davis Department of Recorded Music and Games and everything they throw at me. I think we're now at the frontier of where this new generation will come from. New generation of actors also at our school that I see appearing in films. I was at the Hamptons Film Festivals, and we see our young actors of color there. We do have between us some incredible young talent. And we're finding them. Both of us are now looking at high school programs, starting from high school level, pre-high school level into college, undergraduate, and graduate school. In a big sense, because I'm also a faculty member and a dean, in a big sense, what we're doing at the Tisch School of the Arts at NYU in both dramatic writing and film is looking at the opportunity available in this very naked space known as the independent world, which doesn't seem to exist in the way it existed in these days. So we Hollywood keeps getting further and further along. The budgets keep getting bigger. Their taste keeps getting narrower and narrower, seeming only to care about the remake of the remake of the remake. of the remake, which was remade already. And so we're looking at this open, gaping hole as an opportunity. And we're looking at institutions like ourselves as going to fill that space. So what that means is we have to incubate work at our institutions that will go out fully formed into the world, because there is no other nurturing place for that work to be created. So, for instance, what we're doing in the dreamscape known as people of color who come to NYU who want to be filmmakers, we start with high school programs, the William H. Cosby Future Filmmakers program, which is a free program to people underrepresented in the film and television industry. If they want to come into the film school, they can come in, and we have a graduate and undergraduate program. We have been very fortunate in the film program to have a very diverse showing of black talent coming out of NYU. Recently, Jeffrey Fletcher, the writer of Precious. More recently, 3 features at Sundance, Dee Reese's Pariah, of course. Rashad Ernesto's Gun Hill Road, and Ulrich Brown's Kenya Rwanda. And so from my point of view, it's happening. The talent is there. What happens when they get into that space is a little nebulous, and that's where we are trying to gain more ground and find more people to support our students in their first features and coming out of NYU. The graduate program actually changed and now permits features for thesis. Before it was only shorts for thesis. So now you can make a thesis feature, which will get you right into a place like Sundance and Scene and go on. And so that's sort of what's happening with my group. And Richard is nurturing a similar talented group and can speak to that.
Yes, we, in my department, we concentrate solely on the writers. It's not so much production, which is primarily upstairs in the film department. We're primarily concerned with the writers. As Cheryl has indicated, the summer high school program is incredibly important to us now. We do find a lot of our burgeoning talent in that way, and we spend 6 to 10 weeks, I think, during the summers with the high school kids. And in recent years, we have had an increasing number of students who have taken writing courses with us over the summer apply to the School of the Arts, to dramatic writing. And so a large portion of our freshman class now is made up of students who have already worked with us over the summer program. And I think the film department can say the same kind of thing. So the high school summer program has become incredibly important to the development of new talent in the school. To the specific question about the future of black filmmaking, as I had indicated earlier to this gentleman over here, I am very much an optimist. I think the future is bright. I think it's bright because of the kinds of young people who are graduating from the programs we have at NYU and from other programs around the country, and those who are not even going to school but have that innate talent and that innate drive to be the best storytellers that they possibly can be. Another area that makes the future bright, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that there are so many more young people today who are coming along who don't simply want to be talent in front of the camera. They want to be power behind the camera. And that's the only corollary I can think of is Chris Rock's famous joke that he told, which denotes the difference between being rich and wealthy. And in his joke, he said, Shaquille O'Neal is rich, but the guy who writes the check for Shaquille is wealthy. And what we're starting to see are more and more young people who want to come in and become wealthy. They want to become powers behind the throne. And that's a very, very, very important concept to carry with you as an artist, particularly in this day's market. And the reason why I say that is because right now the business model in Hollywood is undefined. It reminds me very much of the way Hollywood functioned when I first began my career in the early 1970s, where you had a whole generation of older producers at that time whose careers had stretched all the way back to the 1940s. They had no idea what the new young people of my era were interested in, the kinds of films that we wanted to go see. They were completely clueless about it. And the kinds of films that they were making, those Rock Hudson, Doris Day movies, and the last gasps of John Wayne and all that stuff, while it was making money, it wasn't drawing in that younger generation of that time. So they had a tendency to sort of throw the doors open and let young people in, and that's how movies like Badlands and The Wild Bunch and Godfather and all those kinds of films got made. Now we exist in an era where, if my understanding of things is correct, Godfather would not be greenlit in today's market. You know, some of the other films I just mentioned wouldn't be greenlit. We have such a narrowing of the gateway that, you know, we're facing the reality that a lot of black filmmakers aren't having their films made. Though I must admit, I just heard a conversation in the green room back there between two of the gentlemen who are sitting right out here in these first two rows, in which it sounded to me like there's at least 10 or 15 black-themed films coming through the pipeline in the next 5 or 6 months. But if that's the case, then that number is relatively dispiriting, because 10 or 15 films is the same number of films that Nelson just got finished citing back 20 years ago as films that were being planned. By this time, we should have been so much a part of the mainstream that, you know, that number, 10 or 15 films, and most of them films that are made on the low end of the budget scale, that kind of thing should have been something in the past. We should be looking at something much bigger now, something much more substantial in terms of where our talent lies. So when you have young people who not only know how to act in a film, but know how to write it, not only know how to direct a film, but know how to produce it, then you're talking about young people who also have the ability to start thinking about a parallel distribution system. You have young people who are able to take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves and start developing ways in which they can get into distribution and marketing of the product that they develop. And that's why I'm very optimistic about the future of black filmmakers and of the future of American filmmaking in general. Because once that door is kicked open by filmmakers, taking advantage of the new technologies that exist now, then those filmmakers have the power to direct where American filmmaking is going to go into the future. And they also have the ability to take advantage of it financially. Matty Rich, I thought, presented one of the most significant statements of the two groups of statements that I heard this morning, even though I was very impressed with what John had to say about where he was headed and where he thought things were going. Matty talks about the fact that not only is he a filmmaker, but he is now moving into the entrepreneurial stage as far as gaming is concerned. And gaming is a huge future for filmmakers in this country. Gaming is starting to absorb the storytelling techniques of filmmaking. They're starting to employ directors and writers and and producers in the concept of making video games. When you start to learn and master these new technologies and start to think about mastering new areas in which you can take your storytelling skills, then you are also thinking about some new entrepreneurial possibilities for yourselves. And that's the name of the game. What are you going to do for yourselves? The future belongs to your generation, and you get to define how the business is going to look from this day going forward. Don't worry about how it looked in the time of Sidney Poitier or Clark Gable. It was fine for them. The real issue is what is fine for you.
Wow. We describe this as a town hall. So to fulfill that description, we're introducing some other special guests who, and like for each of them to stand, identify themselves and their affiliation, starting at this end, on the front row. Name and affiliation.
Yeah, hi, I'm Michael Dennis, and I run a company called Reelblack. We promote African-American film in the city of Philadelphia and also make film.
I'm Wayne Winborn. I'm a consultant. I work with artists and arts organizations to help them with the cross-section of issues, raising money, strategic planning, organizational development.
I'm Wynn Thomas. I'm a production designer. I'm here because I was participating in the two of the films that were represented tonight. I designed 5 Heartbeats and Jungle Fever. Thank you. And I think I'm the first African-American production designer in the history of the movie business. I think that's isn't that? And some of the movies I've worked on are a variety of, a lot of the Spike Lee films, but also movies like A Bronx Tale that Robert De Niro directed, Wag the Dog, Cinderella Man, A Beautiful Mind, Get Smart, and all kinds of things. So.
I'm Tambio Benson, and I run a website called Shadow and Act. That's all I do.
Hi, I'm Nikisa Cooper. I'm an independent producer here in New York. I just recently produced a film called Pariah that will be released this December by Focus Features. And I have here the VP of Publicity, BJ Carbone from Focus.
BJ!
Very amazing. And I'd just like to shout out the writer-director, Dee Reese, is an NYU grad film alum, and the cinematographer, Bradford Young, Howard, grad film alum.
And before you sit down, what's the opening of the film?
December 28th in New York, LA, and San Francisco. So please support.
December 28th. We got to show up, guys. Okay, December 28th.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angel L. Brown. I actually started a new printed publication called Cinematic Magazine. And I also run a 5-year film festival called QBC Film Festival.
Hi, I'm Wilson Morales. I am the editor of blackfilm.com, a website. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Cindy Campbell, and I'm the Multicultural Arts Coordinator for the Cinema Arts Center in Long Island, Huntington. It's a non-for-profit independent cinema, and we're doing a wonderful job there. I have a program November 22nd, and I'm featuring Melvin Van Peebles. Warrington Hudlin is going to be doing the Q&A, so you can go to the website and see what we're all about. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diane Darspech. I'm co-director of the African Diaspora International Film Festival. You all got, a flyer. I am also general manager of Art Matin Productions, which is a film distribution company. And we have 2 films coming out in theaters at the Quad Cinema on November 30th. One is called The Story of Lovers Rock, and the other one is The First Rasta. So please check out our website. Everything is on there. Thank you.
My name is Reynaldo Spesh. I'm the artist partner in crime. I am the president of Armaton Productions, the film distribution company, and also the co-director of the African Diaspora Film Festival. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to make this fun, but also interesting. I'm going to be a provocateur. I'm going to make the case that 1991, it was all those films, and today, by Nelson is correct. I mean, the drip, the faucet is just now dripping from that gushing. So maybe the appetite for black cinema has disappeared, or maybe the appetite for black cinema is on a very narrow genre. So my question to anybody who's been introduced as a speaker, is it a matter of the public appetite has changed, or is the control mechanism very tightly calibrated? Who wants to take the question? You've been drafting, Nikisa.
I've been called out. Thank you, Dean Antonio. Wow, it's a huge question. I think it's not a matter of an appetite at all. You know, I think the appetite is there for folks to consume, black culture. It's that the system is not necessarily set up, is not necessarily calibrated to allow those films to meet the marketplace. And that's things that I think that this generation of filmmakers it's a truth, and it's something that a lot of us bemoan, but it's not something that we're allowing to stop us from making our films. And I think that a number of the filmmakers that Dean Antonio talked about, and I think there are filmmakers across the nation that are getting their films made and figuring out ways to distribute them outside of what is the normal and traditional means. I think that the fact that the traditional system is falling apart is an incredible opportunity for all of us to have our content and get it direct to people that want to consume it. So I would say no, it's not a question of appetite, it's a question of the controls. And we now have the ability, the strength, the power to go outside of those controls. And so this is really a time of optimism for, I think, black film.
Again, yes.
I completely agree with that point, but I would also say that like what Matty Rich was saying, it's not an event anymore. It's not a novelty to have African American images in movies as it was 20 years ago. If we point back to the New York Times cover, that's a moment in time that's a brilliant image. It captured a lot of hope and optimism. When people see that image and they know the filmmakers involved, it was great. But it was also like an all-star team. I don't know how many people are over the age of 30, but I certainly am. It seems like it's okay not to be that great at what you do when you make film anymore. So I think in the intervening 20 years between the time that picture was taken and today, we've seen a lot of whack movies. And audiences are real careful with their dollar, and they're not necessarily going to rush out to see every black film that comes out. Now, this year and what I think what's happening now is there's a lot of great independent work being made. It's getting the Sundance brand of approval. There's a lot of people that are really highly trained before they go ahead and make a feature film. And that necessarily didn't exist 10 years ago or 15 years ago when people just picked up camcorders and put whatever they wanted out, and we all kind of got bamboozled, so.
Correcting what he was saying, but I also had a chance to speak to Matty Rich, and the perfect thing that he said was that, back then in 1991, it was an event. I think every studio wanted to get on a bandwagon and put out a film that a black director was doing with new talent. We don't have that now. We have less than 5 films coming out. And you look at what the studios are doing, it's also a matter of cost. Back then you could probably put out a movie for less than $20 million, and the studios can take a chance on spending $10 million on a P&A because they know they would probably make 10 times more when they hit the DVD or VHS. Now that market has dried up, the studios are looking at, are we gonna make that money back? So I think we have to be in a position where hopefully through the internet, social media, where we make those movies an event. You look at Tyler Perry, what he does, whether the movie gets negative or positive buzz, we always are talking about it. And when this movie comes out, no matter how negative we talk about it beforehand, he still gets his 20 million opening. He still makes somewhere in an area between 45 and 50 million, which is great for Lionsgate, and he makes much more money on DVD. And so hopefully somebody can probably follow that formula in terms of how to create an event and how to make the release of the DVD or on VOD a marketable and financial profit so that everybody else can get in the game.
Perfect segue then. I'm going to, again, I've got to remind you, everybody, I'm being provocative, okay? So this is the moderator talking, not me personally. So I hope this, actually, I'm gonna set it up. I'm gonna set it up. Nikki's, I'm right there with you, because the Tyler Perry model is economic, but it's also aesthetic. Go ahead, sister.
No, I thought you had a great point about Tyler Perry, but I think we have to not be disillusioned about how that came to be. It's not just that it's an event, and he makes a film and it's an event. He cultivated an audience, way before he got into filmmaking. He cultivated an audience through his theater plays, and that's exactly what I was talking about before. We have that opportunity to go direct to our audience and cultivate that. And so when he makes a movie, he sends an email or writes on his blog, and then his faithful come out. And that's the beginning of it. So we have to remember that model started. He cultivated that model over time. It's not just creating an event around a film release. It's about taking the time to prepare strategically for and understanding who your audience is and prepare strategically to cultivate them along the journey of making the film.
Okay, let me push that further. Which is clearly Tyler Perry, financially speaking, is the most successful of the current generation of black filmmakers. So is his storytelling, is his sense of appetite and audience, is he the guy who got it figured out, and we out here as doing other styles and other genres missing it?
I wasn't. So I was going to say something else, but okay.
Put you into the controversy. Come on.
I think Tyler Perry is just one guy. He's just one person, and he's one person who's successful, and we don't necessarily have to. He's Tyler Perry. I guess he's the biggest. I don't know. I guess he is the biggest name, but I try to sort of look past that. I mean, he's just one guy. He's successful, but he doesn't have to be the only one who's successful. And I'm much more interested in looking at what we're doing. I mean, because right now I feel like we're still talking about this sort of restricted, Hollywood model, and we should maybe be looking outside of that as opposed to worrying about the studio model because I mean.
What model?
I read the New York Times piece. What's it? I forget the title of it, but the 1991 piece. And I'm reading and I'm thinking this. We can say the same things today. Like there's so many things that just haven't changed. So and I feel like something drastic has to happen before we see a shift. Otherwise, in another 20 years, we're going to be having the same conversation. So I'm interested in what's happening on the indie front. So you look at. I think probably the name that most people will remember this year is like Ava DuVernay, what she's doing with the firm, and she's created this distribution model with film festivals. That's so far it's worked with one film, and they're going to be releasing Kenya, Rwanda next month, so we'll see how that does in the years to come, and I'm wondering how that can be replicated on the production side, the production financing side. And then you look at the web, you look at what people like, I'm sure a lot of people in here have probably heard of Awkward Black Girl, Issa Rae. Look at what she's done. I mean, she really just put this thing together very cheaply and it just took off and she's everywhere now.
By show of hands, who knows Awkward Black Girl?
You see,
great.
There you go.
All right.
So and so that really happened. She just took initiative. She had an idea. She put it in action. It worked. Now that's not going to happen for everyone, obviously, but the point is the options are there. And I guess I'm kind of, I don't want to say I've completely given up on Hollywood, but I sort of get over the same sort of conversations about their our marginalization within that model, within that structure, because they haven't really proven that they really care, I guess, for the most part. I mean, I was reading something, just one last point. I was reading Ryan Kavanaugh, who runs Relatively Media. There was an Esquire piece on him, I think it was about a year ago. I recently posted it on my website again. And this guy is maybe 35, 36, he's about my age. And they were asking him how he goes about choosing the films. I mean, he's managing this is hedge fund money. We're talking billion, I think maybe $1 billion or $2 billion that they gave him to invest in films. And he told them exactly how he goes about finding films to finance. And it's so, you think about it and it blows your mind, because they have a spread, they have this algorithm, this Excel sort of spreadsheet thing. They plug in some numbers, plug in some names. There's no interest in I guess we could say maybe this is idealistic, but the art of it, it's all about the money. It's how much can this make, and based on these factors that we enter into the spreadsheet, whatever that spreadsheet spits out, if it's if it says yes, this will make you money, then they go for it. So that's kind of, I think, the thinking within that studio system currently. Maybe it's always kind of been that way, but reading that article really sort of made me kind of I just said, I can't believe this is how it's happening. So if that's the case, then that really makes it harder for the the small guy to come up and try to get something made and get something out.
Or does maybe I'm listening to Richard Wesley or Cheryl. Nelson George, even better. Do we need a black film algorithm?
It exists.
Okay, tell me.
It exists in Nigeria. It exists in Ghana. It exists in Kingston. It exists London. The third biggest film industry in the world is out of Lagos.
Right.
Those films travel around the world. Last year, the Brooklyn District Attorney confiscated 35,000 bootleg African films in Brooklyn, which is a testimony. That means 100,000 being sold. Everywhere I've traveled around the globe in the last couple of years, I've seen these films. I've seen them in storefronts. I've seen them in people's homes. There's a universe of Nigerian film stars that's global. I've seen films that were for the Nigerian or African market, shot in Los Angeles, shot in London.
Wow.
One of the biggest, I'm sorry I was talking to Cheryl, there was a film whose name I'm forgetting, maybe someone in the audience knows it. It was the biggest film in that marketplace a couple of years ago. All of it took place between Nigeria and LA. It was about kind of Nigerian made got involved in some kind of noir story and was being on trial in LA. That idea, now I don't really know the nuances of how people actually get paid. I do know they make a lot of movies very fast. I do know that someone finances these movies on a regular basis, and the directors and the actors work a lot. And if you go into any of these Nigerian film websites, there are stars who are big throughout the third. And it's not just, it used to be initially in Africa. Those films are traveling to the Caribbean. So I'm just saying to you, there's a model that exists. Now, it may not be, we have to figure out a way to access that audience. I think there's no question, because the number one thing they always said about our films, they don't play around the world.
Right.
But someone is making black films that play around the world, and that's part of what we need to be networking
And
with.
what I was told about how it works economically, going back to the beginning of that movement, of the Nollywood movement, and you guys can correct me if I'm saying anything not correct, that they were pirating all the American movies and seeing how well they did, but realized that indigenous product would do even better. And so the bootleggers, the guys who were making money from bootlegging American movies, said, listen, we'll go to a filmmaker, an indigenous Nigerian filmmaker, said, listen, we'll give you this much money, because they knew in advance how big the audience was. So you get a flat fee. And the guys who finance you were also the distributors, like old Hollywood. So you get a flat fee, you put your profit in there, you make your movie, and they take the rest. It works. I'm not mad at them, but that is the model. It's very different from a U.S. model.
So can I
Yes,
jump?
please.
Can I raise the level of being
Please
more
raise it up.
provocative? So here's the most provocative thing I'm going to say today, and blasphemy, right?
Whatever you say, I'm going to try to top it. You know that, right?
Black people are Americans, right? And what we're talking about is an American problem. And what's the American problem? The American problem is the poor schmuck who gets the bronze at the Olympics is crying because he didn't get the gold. The American model is, it's got to be a feature film, it's got to be on the big screen, it's got to be Hollywood. And so what we have to get out of as black people, as African Americans, as people of color, is that there's only that one thing, the Academy Award, Hollywood. And we're not looking at all the other opportunities. And so this is why I wrote my book, Contemporary African American Cinema, because I was living in the times of the 90s. I was in school getting my PhD. My PhD was supposed to be about something else, and I was like, oh my God, this is really happening, this is really happening, this is so exciting. However, the way I wrote that book was to posit African American cinema not as cinema, an other cinema, like third world cinema or African cinema. It's American cinema. So we're stuck in an American way of thinking. And to be doubly provocative, I want to say that as Americans, our taste is a little screwed up. Because I tell every one of my students in my classes, and when I teach throughout an academic year, I have the privilege, I teach a very big lecture class of 200 and then a small class of about 30, an advanced class. You, each and every one of you determines what Hollywood makes. Why? Because they give you what you pay for. They give you what you pay for. We're the ones deciding. If we don't go see those movies, if we go see different movies or don't go at all, believe me, things will change. And I think we don't think about that. We don't think about the power of our $11 or $12. We don't think about the fact that there's a whole space. I was talking to someone, and I heard—
I'm going to challenge you right there, because I hear that often. The biggest refrain I hear from gatherings, it says, Hollywood is green. We vote with our dollars.
Yes.
If we support this, things will change. And you know what? I say, I'm the most provocative, that is not true.
Okay.
I made a movie that made $120 million around the world. It was the third highest grossing movie from Paramount the year I made it. And they would not remotely think about making a sequel. There's certain kind of stories, there's certain configurations behind the screen that are so destabilizing to the vested interest.
Yes.
And so the corporate America has a longer view, which is like, it's not the short-term dollar, it's the long-term dollar.
Yes.
And there are power configurations, they say, no. We let that money go past. So yes, money makes a difference, but if we continue to make money for them,
right,
we will be subject to them.
And I think there are many cases where that is true. But I also think in terms of our taste and going back and forth, I haven't looked at the numbers of this, but you know, one of the problems that I find, and again, this is with my students and conversations with them in the last 20 years, you know, what they have seen as popular films, not critically acclaimed films, right? Look at which Spike Lee movies made more money, right? And maybe it doesn't often result in more and more of that for us. Maybe it does for other people. But I can't relinquish, as an American, my right to vote.
Oh, sure.
And I see going to the movies as important as voting.
But Spike Lee, I talked recently, he said his most successful film financially was Inside Man. He can't get Inside Man 2 made. Richard Wesley has been behind some very commercially successful movies. I'm very curious about your POV on this thing about dollars leveraging power for the director. I mean, have you seen that to be the case? Or some other elements that mediate that?
I'll answer it this way.
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
After the success of Let's Do It Again, Sidney Poitier did approach me about writing a third film. And it was going to be a comedy. And I told him that I didn't want to go back to the formula of the first two, because I thought if we tried to go back to that well a third time, we weren't going to be successful. And I said, we ought to try to go in another direction. We ought to maybe, you know, do something a little bit more dramatic, but have elements of comedy in it. And he said, well, I'll think about it. And some time later, he called me, and he came up with this really great idea. And he said, Richard, I want you to think about this. You know, a historically black college about to go bankrupt, and all of these black business people who are alums of the college come together to, you know, try to save the school. And I'm going to put, you know, this black gangster in it, and he's going to be going with one of the girls who graduated from the school, but now it's years later, and they got a thing going, and I'm going to come in and bust it up. And we threw some other elements in it, the Ku Klux Klan, and some other stuff. There was some. I think black folks would have laughed if they saw some of it. But I don't know. I don't know how some other people might have. Well, anyway, we came up with a script that was light years beyond Uptown Saturday Night and Let's Do It Again. I was really, really, really on my game by that time. I was, that was of the three of them, that was the best script that I ever wrote for Sidney until years and years later when I did this thing for him and Michael Caine. And anyway, he was extremely proud of it. The Mirish brothers, who were a major producing team at that time, were working with Sidney. They were ecstatic about that film. They loved that script. I was like, I felt like every time I went to LA, they like just scooped me up and just carried me around at Universal Studios, man. I was, wow. Hollywood, just like, so anyway, make a long story short, the script went up to the powers that be at Universal and they turned it down. And this was at a time when Sidney Poitier was one of the top 5 Hollywood box office stars in the world. We had just come off a run of 2 highly successful films, both of which I still remember to this day, were listed by Warner Brothers as among their top 50 highest grossing films since the founding of the studio.
Wow.
We had all kinds of other accolades. Sidney had, the 2 films that won NAACP Image Awards, Films of the Year, blah, 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 blah. And that script got turned down. That script got, Sidney, we were expecting another comedy from you, and well, we're just not sure that this is the kind of movie that audiences will really come out to see. And I'm sitting there, Sidney's telling me this, and I'm thinking, Sidney just got phone calls, commitments from Billy D. Williams, Diana Ross, Lee Chamberlain, John Amos, and Calvin Lockhart, plus Sidney. They're all going to be in the film, top headline stars at that time. Oh, and not to mention Denise Nicholas and Diane Carroll. And they're saying this movie is not going to make money for them. And they stuck to their guns. Sidney left the studio, went to another studio. He did Piece of the Action, kept on getting up. And
this might be a parallel story. Some of you probably know that the movie that's opened a couple weeks ago, Tower Heist, was an original idea from Eddie Murphy, in which was all black. It was Chris Rock, it was Nelson, who were the people in it?
Bernie before he died, and it was going to be Black Young Guns, okay? And that was the original idea. And somewhere along the line, things happen.
So this sounds similar because you have Eddie Murphy had an idea in which it was an all-star team of black comics, and somehow in that process, in the decision-making process, it got turned into what's in the theaters now, which underperformed by all measures. Ah. Give him a bite, please, double up.
I read that script early on. I was talking to them about designing it, and at that point, Eddie Murphy was playing the Ben Stiller role. So, yeah. He wasn't playing the criminal. No, he wasn't. He was playing the Ben Stiller role, and there was this whole thing. I remember the script, loving the script, because there's this moment at the end of the movie where everybody who he had helped comes to praise this man. it was a really it was a fantastic ending, which is not the ending of the script right now. So.
It's kind of like.
Actually, before you could just.
I was just going to jump in. Just a couple of things on this issue of capital. I had a conversation with some folks recently. George Lucas.
Put the mic closer.
George Lucas. I think it's still coming out. I haven't seen trailers for, but Red Tails is coming out.
Red Tails.
So he's on the rights to that for years, and finally got it made. Got a young, talented brother directing it, Anthony Hamilton. But he's been going around to select gatherings of Anthony Hemingway. Anthony Hemingway. Anthony Hamilton's a singer. Oh, you young folks, it's gonna happen to you in about 25 years. But he's been going around to different groups of select African Americans. He recently spoke at a gathering of African American corporate board members. These are loaded. These folks are all loaded. And he told the story of he ended up financing the thing completely himself because he could not get money for it. This is George Lucas. Industrial Light and Management. And I mean, I actually happened to see the script. It's a great script. They're going to market it to death. But he was going to these folks, to these African Americans, saying, spread the word because the movie's got to make money, because this is just going to validate what they think anyway, this notion. And when it came to me, I said, well, I think we should spread the word. I hope the movie makes a lot of money. But making money is not going to guarantee that Hollywood's going to greenlight it. I think you both are right because, again, we talk about I spent too much time in corporate America. We talk about Hollywood. These are individuals, and in Hollywood, the corporate America is not so much this because it tends to skew a little older. But Hollywood, typically, you're talking. I mean, I know some of these guys. These are 30-something-year-old white guys, and they like a spreadsheet. There will be an algorithm. That's exactly what they say. But they will also look at that algorithm and say, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And the easiest way you can tell whether you like his movies or not, if they did believe it, they'd have 1 million Tyler Perrys. They'd be churning out tons of movies, not necessarily good, but targeting that audience because they continue, Jennifer Aniston continues to make movies. Her movies haven't made a dime, right? They don't make any money. They don't. She continues to make money. Every summer there's the white kid in high school movie with a new crop of actors. God bless them. Most of them don't make money. Most of them don't. They're not. I wish they would emulate Tyler Perry, quite honestly, because a lot of folks would work. And that is a proven model. They're not doing it. The thing I would say to folks, and the thing I say to artists who are trying to raise money, is this new notion that I think Warrington and Akeisha and other folks have talked about. There's a lot of space to do creative, interesting things and find a different distribution platform. And I do think the film industry is in a tumult right now. I think the best model for it is the music industry. The major labels, I'm a big jazz guy. The major labels have gone. I'm glad. They should have gotten out. They shouldn't have been charging $17 for a domestic disc when they cost them $4 to make it, and they just put it on a truck and sent it to Tower Records. And what you see is a lot of artists, but Branford Marsalis tells the story of how when he was on Sony, with the Sony marketing machine, his units, he was selling 2,000 records. He starts his own label, and he sells 2,500 records. So what's Sony doing for him? So today, it's so much cheaper to make a record. Artists are going directly to their audiences. Rappers did it. That's how Master P made all his money. And I think the film industry, if you don't get commerce and art confused, I think that's where the hot stuff is going to go in the film industry. I think young artists have got to figure out the art they want to make, and then afterwards figure out the platform and the distribution channel for it, and not get caught up. Even though I want somebody to make a $100 million movie, but not get caught up in that being the only thing they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to make 3 points, hopefully briefly. I agree with Dean Antonio that when you go to a movie theater, it should be a vote. You're endorsing the kind of stuff that you want to see. But at the same time, I think it's a little different from 20 years ago in the sense that we have so many options available to us that now we get to see within the spectrum, like within a white light, there's all the colors in the spectrum. And I think that the African-American audience is fragmented in a way that it's really, really difficult to get us all to agree to go see one thing. I was personally directly involved with I Will Follow, which was a firm's first release, and I'm definitely involved with Kenya Rwanda, which comes out December 2nd at the AMC Empire. Please go see it, and bring 3 friends and tell 8 friends about it, so that they know about it. Because
bring 3 friends, see it 3 times.
or buy 3 tickets. We don't really care if you see it. It's just but I agree with you that the model needs to change. Like, one weekend really is not fair for a small film to try and get as many people to go see it. So I'm thinking like tours, anything like a higher ticket price, anything that's gonna help solidify the base. Maybe you're not gonna get as many more people to go see the film as you would in one night, but if you charge a higher price, you have a premium to it, or you throw in some incentives with it, the DVD or whatever, you can make just as much money and be just as successful with your project as you would if you ran it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. And that all points to marketing dollars and how much money really is needed in order to make a movie #1 at the box office. Black film just simply, I don't think, has a chance, because the people that pull the trigger on how much money actually goes towards spending the movie to promote it is difficult. And then also we shoot ourselves in the foot when we just buy the bootleg or wait for the video or whatever. So that's the main point. And then I don't know if anybody's seen our clip on Reelblack TV with Russell Simmons, but he's all into post-racial society. I can't be that way. I'm really just concerned about our niche. But his point is, why would I create a business that only is attracting 5% of the buying public? I want my work to reach everyone. And I don't know if black film can exist and still please everybody, but that's just something I want to throw out.
Well, and actually on that point, I do a series here at the museum once a month. It's called Fist and Sword. I exclusively show movies from China, Japan, Korea, and Thailand. And the room looks like this room right here. So it just strikes me, I am just addict to Asian action movies. I love them with a passion. Now, they're not making those movies thinking about me, but so I'm suggesting that when you do good work, it crosses geography, culture, race, gender, etc. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I would like to speak a little bit about what we do. In 1993, we began the African Diaspora Film Festival. The concept was not only to show African American films, but films about black people all over the world. Next year, we began the distribution company. I'm going to switch to distribution. We released a film from Egypt, completely. I was reading that, I don't know for how many years, American audiences had not seen an Egyptian film in theaters. And the film is going to be on Link TV this month, as a matter of fact. Incredible film, but we saw it at the Toronto International Film Festival. No one picked it up, we did. We released it, how? We found what we at the office call an alternative theater. We went, New Yorkers know perhaps, the Riverside Church. Well, we released the film in that church. There's a theater in the church, and we released the film there. And the write-up we got from the New York Times moved the film to another level. People who didn't even know that there was a theater in that church showed up to see the film, and they were asking us, why is this film playing here? Well, we don't have an access to other theaters in this town. So I think it is important to understand how we can create alternative ways to show our films. If the aim is $100 million, well, I'm sorry, I haven't made that money yet with that film. But the films are there. The film has played in Honolulu, in Connecticut, Miami. It was so popular that when we opened the festival, our film festival, we are going to play the film again at the Quad Cinema for a week. So there are ways of bringing people out. We need to interact with our audience, and we need to build a taste. How do we do that? We need to write. We don't write much. The work Tamba is doing is good, but I think it has to be improved. We need to write, because when you have publications like Filmmaker and Film Comment, and you go in there and you read those publications, you don't see much about us. And the arc of African talent in the world, behind the camera and in front of it, is incredible. So we need to build that taste. So the same way you talked about craft. Nigerian cinema has a problem with craft. Well, you go to FESPACO and you see films that don't have that problem. We have released in this film in this country and people don't know much about it. Why? Because we don't write about it. Teza, the film directed by Haile Gerima, won in FESPACO. The issue was a jury in FESPACO. I don't know, I mean, I wasn't involved in that, but she was the jury. The film won the Etalon de Yenenga, which is the big prize in FESPACO. When people write about Teza in this country, they talk about the prize that Teza won in Venice. They don't mention FESPACO. I don't remember any one of our black writers writing about the Etalon de Yenenga, FESPACO, and Teza. Teza did In and Out in New York City. You see what I mean? So we have a problem of intellectualizing our work and showing it to the world with the intellectual rigor and sophistication that we have in our communities.
You know, you're in your unique position because with 19 years, you've been really the person to introduce to American audiences these films. He has another, the mic back. I'm going to ask you, just for our own, because we don't know, can between the two of you name 4 movies that we missed that are just we need to see?
For example,
from your festival.
You missed John Caney. He's not here because John Caney directed a play by the title Nothing But the Truth.
Mm-hmm.
We distributed the film, missed it. We played at BAM twice. Good reaction, but we never got the possibility of showing the film after that. Arugba, a Nigerian film, Tunde Kelani, don't forget him, he's incredible. Okay. Another film, you're going to have the chance to see it, Scheherazade Tell Me Story, the Egyptian film. And now we have The First Rasta. I have my problems with the film, but it's a film that we know about Rasta. We have seen Rasta, so this is a film that goes to the origin of the movement. And the story of Lovers Rock, which you mentioned, Isaac Julian. Well, Menelik Shabazz is part of the Black British movement with Horace Ove and others. So Menelik Shabazz, after 30 years, he made a film about that period in the 70s and the 80s where the UK Britons, I mean Black British people, transform in a certain way reggae into something slower, and they call it Lovers Rock. Menelik, after 30 years, I mean, he's very persistent, made a film about that. We are inviting Menelik. He's an incredible person. He'll be here with us talking about his film. We are opening the festival with that. And after that, it's going to be for a week at the Quad Cinema again. After that, we don't know. But those are great films that connect with this Afrocentric thing that we all have. And we need to write about it, we need to discuss about it, and we need to see the connections we have, because the Afro-British urban experience is very close to the African-American urban experience.
By any chance, you guys showing a movie that seems to be, I think you wrote about it already on Shadow Act, Attack on the Block? Attack the Block. It's gone already?
Which?
Okay, pass it by. So why?
I'm sorry, why what?
Why is it gone already?
It wasn't released widely enough. I mean, I actually had that question myself because it didn't. I think it only made something like $2 million. I mean, this is a.
Edgar Wright, who was the executive producer of it, and I met him a year ago, and he started sending me emails saying, Screen Gems had picked it up, and they were dumping the film. He said they put no money in it. They just put some posters out. There was, I mean, he really, this is a guy who's made big movies, but he was, can you tell any black people about this film? Literally, Screen Gems bought it, an excellent film. I loved it. I saw it a couple of times. John Boyega, great young actor, you know, baby Denzel, I call him, you know, fantastic in the film. But I'm telling you, I don't know why they bought the film, because they really put it out with no effort. And
they didn't do anything with it. I mean, they had a bunch of free screenings over the summer, all over the country, and maybe those free screenings maybe sort of was a little bit too much, and they should have maybe just held it back a little bit. But they didn't release it widely enough. I think this is a film that they could have released on probably over 1,000 theaters.
Absolutely.
But they released it on probably double-digit theaters, I think it was. So it didn't play very widely at all.
So this circles back to
I have to think they bought the film for the remake rights. I mean, I don't understand. Mm-hmm. I don't understand, because it's a great idea. Aliens in the Hood. I mean, you can sell
actually, when they remake it, it'll star Justin Timberlake probably.
Hey, can I also want to bring up the sort of the dialogue across is the experience I had was Good Hair. Film I produced it was Chris Rock. And that's a film that when we made the film, we thought it would play in the U.S. and that would be it. Turned out that film had incredible appeal around the globe in various different formats. It wasn't all released theatrically, but the DVD was released in Scandinavia. It played in South Africa. It played TV in Asia. I mean, in other words, that particular film, which we didn't think would have any appeal quite ourselves. We were making a film for the U.S. Turned out to have a remarkable amount of international appeal, and played in various formats through a sales agent, a very aggressive sales agent, bought the film, and said, "I can really make this thing work." He sold it in France for a DVD sale. In certain markets, it played on TV. So he took this film and said, "This is a black film. It's a very black American experience." But maybe it's a black American experience, but actually it turned out to be an international experience on two levels. We found audiences of African women and Caribbean women around the world, and in London and in other countries, who really loved the film because it was about their experience and their challenges. And we also found people, Europeans and Asians who were interested. Is like, oh, this is a cultural film about a culture we don't understand or know. So it was a very enlightening experience for us in the sense that we constantly heard, you can't sell these films around the globe. But if you're not looking just at a theatrical release, if you're using all the different distribution platforms available, you can make a film that's an American quote-unquote film, take it around the world. As long as your expectations of what that release pattern is are non-traditional, you can make your money back and actually reach a lot of audiences.
That's a really important thing. This is what I said about black people are Americans and we cry when we get the bronze medal. There's silver, there's bronze. That's what I'm talking about when I said that nobody thought about the church, but the bronze led to the silver. And I think we're stuck. And to underscore your point again, FISPACO was not mentioned, but Venice was, right? Because we're only looking for the #1 slot. We can't do that anymore as a people. We can't do that as Americans. Forget about as black people or African Americans. We shouldn't be doing that as Americans. We have to look at the other 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are great spots too. And we still, we try to do that with our students. They still want Sundance, they still want Cannes, no matter what color they are, right? We keep going for the #1. And if we don't start looking at all the other layers and create those spaces and opportunities, I think it will be a lost cause.
I'm sorry, let me just say one more thing. You want to say something about me? Uh-oh.
I also wanted to his point about media and black film media. I did a film called Brooklyn Boheme, a documentary about Fort Greene and the whole scene there in the 80s and 90s. My man's website here shouted us out, put the trailer up. The folks from Urban World Festival saw it, gave us a call. We got booked as an opening night film because of that exposure. We're on the verge of hopefully closing a deal with a cable company to air it next year. So that pattern, because of his exposure and because of his website, has really benefited. So I mean, his site is a really important site for the exposure of black film. And we probably need more sites to continue this dialogue. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. To go to Ronaldo, I was going to say Mr. Spesh. He's absolutely right. I think I think there's an education that's missing, especially when it comes to non-black American films. We try to give a lot of these films exposure, but then there's just a context that's missing. And I'm still learning. I'm still educating myself, so I can provide some of that context for the readers. But even still, then there's still just there just isn't an innate interest in seeing some of these films that Ronaldo mentioned, for example, from our readers. I mean, we post something about Tyler Perry, and oh my God, there's 300 comments. You post something about Onam Kikria, the man who cried, for example. It's crickets. It's like a graveyard, and nobody's really interested. I mean, even though we wrote about that film so many times. I mean, so many times, and I saw it. A couple of the writers we saw. We reviewed it. Still, like many people still don't know it even exists. So there's an education that's missing. I'm not quite sure what to do about that. And I think one thing that I continue to do with the website is I'm continuously trying to bring in other writers from other parts of the diaspora so that we have this sort of much more diasporic coverage. And that's the challenge, because right now it's almost like, you know, we're a little bit too heavy on the Black American side. I think something Mike said about the fact that we're kind of fragmented. I mean, I think that's okay, actually. I mean, because I think that indicates that we're not this monolithic group of people, that we have different tastes, and so you know there's Tyler Perry's audience, there's that audience, there's I don't think we're all gonna agree on anything. We're not all gonna rush out and see Pariah. I mean, that'll be nice, certainly, for Nikisha and
shame on you.
And Deirdre, but we're not. It's just not gonna happen. No matter how much. There's just some people who are just not interested in that. That's just a fact. And so you.
The point I wanted to make, I forgot to say, was that it's a lot easier to get people to go see something like Muslim than it is to get people on the same page on another Black indie film, because it's just easier to market to a group that's already pre-existing.
Yeah, and just I want to say a couple more things, but now that I bring that up, yeah, I mean, the one thing that Kasim did. Kasim is the director of Muslim. He did pretty much what Tyler Perry did. He cultivated an audience. Before the film was made, he was on Facebook, he was on social networking. He used the technology that we have, and he amassed something like 80,000 Facebook fans for a film that wasn't even out yet. So there was already this interest, and he cultivated the audience. So when it came out, he just marketed directly to that audience, and they were there waiting for it, and they went out and they saw it and they supported it.
But
I think it made something like $350,000.
On that part of the audience waiting for it, I think actually Pariah is going to be a wonderful surprise for folks.
I hope so.
I think
so.
that there are certain stories about communities who have been off screen, so to speak, and when you do something that's thoughtful and artistically well done, you're going to win. And I think that as audience members, when we take that chance, when we step into a story that's folks that we need to look at, a community that's around us, but we have been reducing to stereotypes. I think that's you come out of it. When I went to see Pariah, I was like, whoa, you know, it was really, you walk out smarter. You walk out of the film with a deeper understanding and compassion and respect, and so that's a good time at the movies. So I think that it's really becomes a marketing challenge to get people to say, hey, this is maybe not what you know, but something you need to know.
Right, and my go ahead. My final point is. I think something you said a little bit earlier, but also I think what you just said too is just stressing the importance of why we, those of us in this room anyway, Black people need to support these films, because, you know, I mean, say what you will about some of these surveys, but there was a survey, I forget who did the survey, it was one of the major media outlets did the survey, maybe it was about 2-3 months ago, and they asked primarily white American audiences these questions about Black films, and they asked them, would you see a Black film with essentially, I think maybe it was very specifically about love stories, like rom-coms or romantic comedy or whatever. And they said, would you see a film if it had two Black leads, a Black man and a Black woman, would you see it? Versus if it was a Black man and a white woman, or a white man and a Black woman. I mean, it was really. I think I already figured that was the case anyway, but something about it was still very eye-opening, because they were very, there was definitely a difference. I mean, they said that they would not see a film that had two Black leads. And then so this is the kind of information that studios are using to determine some of the choices that they make, because white America is not rushing to see some of these quote-unquote Black films.
And let me suggest, and I'm saying what I don't know, it's a guess, and Wayne is going to come behind me and straighten me out, but one of the problems, because white America consumes Black culture in music all the time. So the question is, on that question, why don't they? And here's what I've come to, and I hope it's gonna. It's not that they don't want to consume it; they don't want to consume it in the room with you. When House Party, which is a very come on, how nice can you get, right? In 1990, when we came out, there was a theater in Denver that played the movie with much trepidation and refused to turn the house lights down. They showed the movie with all the lights up just like this because they was afraid of what black people would do in that theater. And so it is really the reticence to buy the ticket is that they don't know who's sitting beside them. It's not that it's any kind of reluctance about the story. It's reluctance about the audience. Yes, sir.
I would like to say this.
I promised him next.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Well, he passed it back to you, brother.
Just later, I mean, talking about the Hollywood Reporter, he went through political affiliation and how they react to films, and Republicans and Democrats love Medea Family Union.
Okay.
Just a real quick comment. I may be the only person here who actually, sadly, have been involved in the design and execution of polls. And I'm a social researcher by training. The problem with the polling stuff, man, the companies and the media industry, they use polls to support decisions they've already made.
Exactly.
I'm just gonna tell you. Polling, one of the big scams, it's gonna come out eventually because as we move to a more digital land, folks won't be doing. One of the dirty secrets on polls, even, when ABC News does a poll, the cat who's the news director for them, they do random digit dialing, right? So they just randomly calling phone numbers. They have to do an 18-year-old, most of the folks, Princeton Survey Resources or ABC News or Harris, the big folks. The real deal is they end up calling the average household about 10 times before they get a response. They have to talk to 2 or 3 people before they get an 18-year-old. Seriously. And they don't want to have duplicate responses, so they won't talk to 2 adults. Anyway, by the time you've got to 1,200 people, and the numbers are good. I mean, if you do a good survey, you got 1,200 people, you can represent the country statistically. You got a nice bell curve. You got a little error on either end. You want to keep the questions simple. The point I'm just trying to get to, by the time they give you the results of some survey, if you read that little box at the bottom, the Hollywood Reporter survey, they only talked to like 900 folks. It was probably the 6th or 7th person in the house. Right? They probably had a 10-item questionnaire. They probably only got through 7 items because most people ain't gonna sit there for 10 items. I'm just telling you how this works. And they did yes or no questions because it's easy. Will you go or not? No. Have them go back and do the thing and say, will you go see a movie with Will Smith? Yes. And then ask them if they'll go see a movie with a black person. They'll say no after saying they go see a movie with Will Smith. I'm just...
Oh, okay. One of the things that I'm doing with my magazine, Cinematic Magazine, is basically highlighting these black filmmakers, not just U.S., but also just internationally across the board. We're actually working on an international issue where you can find out about these films, but it's also important that we get people of color to write these articles. So that's pretty much what we're doing. I just believe in just documenting and archiving these type of films and letting people know that they exist. There's a lot of black films out there, and a lot of us don't know about it. Like, I was speaking to a few of my colleagues, and a lot of people still don't know about Affirm. A lot of people don't know about Muslim, and these films were pretty big in, as far as the independent circuit. So I'm not really understanding why that's not the situation. So, having a printed publication where you can actually, fill the papers, even though he was saying I should move to digital. I will at some point, but, I'm not really trying to compete with Filmmaker Magazine or Movie Maker Magazine. It's really about just highlighting these black filmmakers and, giving them their shine and letting people know about these images.
We have to do is, again, we're Americans, we only want the number 1, right? Let's look at number 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Let's look at all the publications. I will never, as long as I'm alive, and as long as I'm alive, I hope I'm teaching, I will never give up. I teach, I do a lot of things, I write. I also have taken a personal responsibility to create audience taste. It is my job to take my friends and my students in my class to see films they would not normally go and see. And if we all start trying to do that, I think Pariah is going to be a big hit because, one of the things, And it's not because it's an NYU film. It's because it's a great film, and because it's about story, and it's about character, and it's about identity, and I think it's about family, and I think it's a very universal story. I think the niche theme of homosexuality is, just a part of the story. It is not the story, right? It is not what the film is about. It's about a whole bunch of other things, about loss and stuff like that. But if we all take the responsibility of creating taste in people, we have friends, we have relatives, we have children. I tell my mother what to go see, when to go see it. Unfortunately, we're in a country where if it's not hitting opening weekend, nobody's interested because it's got to make $200 million. But we can change that. And if you work, I work at a university that I attended myself as an undergraduate, that charges $50,000 a year and leaves people in up to $200,000 worth of debt. If I didn't believe in taste creation and these other things, I really couldn't sleep at night. I really would not be able to sleep at night. And so the question is not what's happening. The question is not what happened. The question is not what's wrong with America. The question is, what are you going to do when you leave here? What are you going to do? Who are you going to talk to? Who are you going to take to the movies? I do that all the time. And how many of you that are in the classroom are going to take films and show them to people and get their tastes changed? I had the privilege, Spike Lee is the artistic director for our graduate program, and I actually had the privilege of sitting in the class where he had John Singleton come and talk. And just in the small talk, there was a comment. He was just asking, has everyone seen, what's that crazy cheap movie that was made? Oh, Paranormal. He said, have you guys all seen Paranormal Activity? And somebody was saying something like, oh, it's not my speed, it's not my taste. He goes, wait a minute, do you love movies? You see everything. You go and you see everything. You don't just see the stuff you think you already know and want to see. You go and you see something. So regardless of what's going on, I'm never going to get out of that business. And I know that everybody in this room can do something. And so whatever your activism is, I'm not going to occupy Wall Street. I'm going to try and get people to occupy theaters and start thinking about being, which is again an American problem, being part of a larger world and not seeing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I will do that till I have no breath left in me or until Richard takes me home.
And John,
one of the things that I'm happiest about in terms of teaching at the school is that there's a minor that students can take in both our departments, and it has to do with producing. And one of the things that the writers in my department who take those courses learn about is marketing and how to market the product that you make. And this applies, because we don't only teach screenwriters, we also teach television writing and we teach playwrights. And so what we're trying to do is empower the writers in all three areas to be able to take control of their creation and to maintain that control and to be involved in marketing their product and also to get into distribution and to understand something about distribution. Now, in listening to the comments that have been made and everything that we've been talking about, I was struck by the fact that Tyler Perry's name has come up so often, and we talk about his particular business model and how he cultivated and developed his audience. I began my writing career as a playwright in the Pleistocene era, the transition from the 60s to the 70s. And at that time, it was black theater that was big. This was just before the explosion of what became known as the blaxploitation era, which predates the era that we're talking about now, which goes back to 20 years ago, the Jurassic Age. And, and during that time, when there was black theater, there were over 350 black community theaters that were functioning in the country. These theaters all operated on the basis of having at least 4 main stage productions in any theater season, and they were pretty much capable of doing this in excess of 10 to almost 15 years. That sort of petered out eventually, particularly when Reagan became president, but that's a whole other story. Of those 300 plus theaters that were started, nearly 200 still exist. And they still have seasons. They don't all have complete seasons that one would want, but what is, I think, important for all of you young filmmakers out there to understand is that each of these 200 theaters has a minimum of 100 seats. And they are dark a large period of the time. They are looking for something to exhibit. They have the ability to exhibit films. They have the ability, some of them, not all of them, to even exhibit video films or digital films. I'm sorry, I think that's the digital film. Okay. Having said that, yeah, I mean, no, I make no pretense anymore. I'm hardcore, old school, born right at the end of World War II. I'm not, I'm not fronting, you know. I still got my vinyls. I still, somewhere in my attic there's still an 8-track.
Singleton, did you see his vinyl in the background?
Richard, to underline your point,
yeah,
I got an invitation. I guess it's like a year ago, to it was a group in Texas called the Black Academy of Arts and Letters. Mm-hmm. And they asked me to come down. So I said, okay, they met my modest speaking fee. So I went down, and so the car picks me up at the airport, and we drive and got to the building. And I said, it said on the side of the building, Black Academy of Arts and Letters. I said, that's kind of bold. For you have an office in here, you just put your name on the building. Come on, I said, okay, it's Texas, anything can happen. I walked in, this brother owned the whole building. Yeah. He has multiple theaters, one of which, are you ready for this, has more seats than the Apollo. I was like, what? And because in Dallas, Texas, he is the game. And so I had my screening, immediately got on the phone, called Melvin Van Peebles, go down there. Call Stanley Crouch, go down. So I am constantly letting him know I'm his New York ambassador. There are places that have seating, gigantic, and audiences who really are hungry. But you know what? We have a guest who came, Tamir Muhammad. This brother is, no, too late now? Okay. No. He runs the feature program, the TAA at Tribeca Film Institute. This brother has been at the cutting edge for many years of creating opportunities and empowerment, and I want you to jump in this conversation.
I'm not a guest, I'm just a participant, but
now, stand up.
Thank you, by the way.
Yes, sir.
And,
we can't see you, brother. Stand up, please.
Sorry. It's really refreshing to sort of hear it. I mean, I'm part of the sort of landscape of giving filmmakers money. So, it's good to really sort of hear this feedback from everyone in the audience. I think one of the biggest challenges is that we don't do enough to really stress the responsibility we have from a professional standpoint to teach the business of film to filmmakers of color. And I think that's what I'm finding is the biggest challenge. When you go and you pitch to a production company, whether it's a small one or a big one, you're normally pitching to someone who has either have to pitch up to their boss, go back to their colleagues and justify why they're greenlighting your project, in addition to projects that they feel passionate about, that they want to push forward for whatever reasons, and also inheriting projects that their predecessor also sort of had in the pipeline. So you got to kind of jump all of those sort of hurdles to sort of make the case for why they are greenlighting your project. And the challenge with that is that a lot of times, specifically, filmmakers don't give enough of the nuts and the bolts about their project to sort of give that person enough to take back and sort of make the case for that. When you look at that, whether it be a studio or a company, when you look at film festivals, a lot of the independent films today you see have foundation support, such as Tribeca Film Institute, Sundance, IFP. But even in that case, when a lot of these organizations are nonprofit and we don't look for anything other than recognition at the end of your film, that's just the challenge. We have to see a project get completed. And a lot of times there's not enough put into sort of developing the filmmaker to understand that if you can't show what you're going to be able to make with 1 million, you can't request 100 million to make your film. So it's kind of hard when you come in and you're asking for money, whether it be for an organization or a company, if you haven't really done the due diligence to sort of understand how you're going to make that money back, or even if not make that money back, sort of be the investment, even if it's a nonprofit, that you're going to ensure that your film is going to be completed, and that what they, at the end of the day, have to sort of justify even to their sponsors why they invested in you. And I think the dangerous trend that is happening not only in production companies but institutes is to go with what is safe. So then you go for, and you want to champion the person who already have shown that they can make a film, and then you lose out on discovery because it's too risky to take a chance on the first-time filmmaker. I'm really proud to say that we have always sort of challenged that as best as we could, but I think we all internally have to do much more about sharing resources with each other so that you know that you're doing the work before you even greenlight your project to even know what your second project is. So that it's shocking when I go to filmmakers at a festival and I say, well, what are you working on next? And they're shocked that I'm actually asking that. And it's to a point that I think we're going to do ourselves the best when we do better to share the information about what we should be doing professionally to make sure the business side of it doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
I was gonna talk about a film. I think a film that had a remarkable success story that may still be having some positive impact on this discussion. That is Precious. It's a throwback, grassroots. I mean, Lee raised the money independently. He took a book that no one thought was adaptable, found a brother that adapted, and they made this film. The film made a lot of money, won a lot of awards. People have issues with different parts of it. It was an artistic vision, very singular. I actually think, in a way, that the attention to Pariah, that even the help being made, somehow are offshoots of the impact of Precious to prove that black women-based stories with drama, real dramas, can translate to a mass audience, which is what Precious did do. I think in this discussion about ways in which things can work or not work, that is a success story that's a very recent one. It's a film actually I find very hard to watch again because it's a hard experience. But that sort of speaks to the power of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that we should look at what Lee accomplished with that and see that as another potential kind of model. Hopefully Pariah will continue in that. Help, and I have a lot of problems with the Help, is a very successful film, and it did reach across a lot of audiences. So if we're going to deal with these films as products that reached out, there are elements to Pariah, to Help, that in some respects echo Precious. Are black women's stories more viable, or is this another area of emphasis? I just bring it up because I think it's something we should discuss, since that's a film that's successful this year, and these are all very recent films. Anybody want to jump in? Please do.
Okay, I guess that's the elephant in the room, the Help and Precious. Okay, so the criticism of the Help is, do you necessarily, to break the $100 million barrier today, do you need to tell your black story from the point of view of a white protagonist, even though obviously Viola Wilson is the protagonist if you read the script. And then with Precious, do we have to air our dirty laundry? in order to get critical acclaim from the Academy? I mean, do we need that kind of attention in order to achieve that kind of success? I mean, those are the questions that always come up when those movies happen. You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I don't.
One of the things that interests me about Precious is the continued interest in Precious, right? I'm at a point now, I've had many conversations about it, had a lovely debate with Stanley Crouch about it, which this gentleman roped me into. And I'm dying to write about Pariah, but the invitation I got was to continue talking about Precious. There's a publication coming out shortly. I hope my piece will be in it, because a lot of people, they had more scholars write for this. It's Black Camera, and Black Camera is planning a complete issue devoted to Precious. So I wish all Black films would get that kind of attention, and I have some real questions as to why it's getting that kind of attention. And hopefully my piece comes out and you'll read it. I also have real questions about the notion that some complex character, because I think what I go for as a person when I go watch Black people, I'm looking for complexity. And I think Precious missed an opportunity to create complex characters. I think you can make a negative character that's very complex. I think we saw that in Pariah, which is what I really want to write about, is why can't Black characters be more complex? You know, it seems that the simplified characters get more, and maybe that's an American thing. It's an American thing. It's the complex Democratic answers are too complicated, but the Republican answers are straightforward. Yeah, let's go get them, you know, whatever. And that's a real concern. And again, for me, that comes back to us. And so I'm interested to see what invitations I get to write, because that it's just also the same thing. People are interested in talking about the same thing rather than something different. And it's interesting because that film flew right to the top, and so did The Help. And let's see, I'm dying to see where Pariah will fall out in that, and to make more allegations or assessments. Go ahead.
And you know what? You have the last word, so make it good.
Wow. We talked a lot about Pariah today, and you know, the hope, of course, is that it does really well at the box office. But the sad fact is that it's one movie. You know, it's one movie, and you know, how did the movie get made? The question here is, what's the future of Black cinema? How many filmmakers do we have in the audience? How many of you are writer-directors? How many are producers? Okay, great. I think that the future of Black cinema is really about community. I don't think that as writer-directors, you should be expected to understand and produce your own films. You shouldn't have to be a one-man band. I think it's really about community. You know, my partnership with Dee Reese is about her being concerned with the content and me being concerned about surveying the landscape and figuring out how to get that content to the audience. And a film like Pariah gets made like every other film. It started with an idea. She wrote a script. You know, I put together a business plan. We went and knocked on studio doors, production company doors, individual neighbor doors, and they were all shut in our face. And at the end of the day, you know, it was a couple of foundations that first supported the film with small grants, 10,000 here, 20,000 there. And at the end of the day, it was really me putting together a cash flow exercise to get us from week to week, day to day, to make the film.
Don't forget your NYU grant.
And the NYU grant, of course, absolutely, to make the film. But the point here is that we all have access to that. You know, it's not like Dee and I came from money. It's not like we came from, you know, prestige or any of that. Everyone in the audience has access to what we did with Pariah. You know, it's amazing that this film was picked up at Sundance and is going to be distributed by Focus Features, who's been incredible in supporting it and putting it out there. But it's just one film, and we can't hang the future of cinema on one film. You know, so that means that everyone in the audience that's working on content has to make sure that if you're a writer-director, find a strong producer to work with you. You know, if you're a producer, make sure you're going out and finding artists to support. You know, my job sits at the intersection of art and commerce. You know, and so it's important for me to find artists, find folks that have content, and work with them to put that content out. And as journalists, as purveyors of cinema, as consumers of cinema, as directors of film festivals, it's all about helping support. It's all about community. It's all about the positivity of the singular idea of a story, moving forward from the content creator to the audience, and making sure that we're all taking personal responsibility to do our parts. And so at the end of the day, I think it really does come down to community. If we're not supporting each other, if you're not figuring out what your role can be in this grand thing of black cinema, then, yes, it'll die. And we'll be talking 20 years from now about why there are only still 10 and 15 black films that are marketed every year. The fact that we've talked about there are multiple, options. The Pariah route is one option. There's the Ava DuVernay out, the Firm releasing movement is another option. The film festival space is another option. Hulu is another option. That whole digital, idea is another option. The Awkward Black Girl, is another option. You put it out in pieces. So right now there's so much opportunity. There's opportunity, and this is a time for positivity. But if we're sitting in our rooms and trying to figure this out on our own, it's not going to work. You've got to figure out what your role is, find the people that are going to support your vision. It's all about community, and that's what I think the future of this thing is.
And what a perfect way to wrap up. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Would everybody on the town hall please come to the stage?